Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Gladys Rickard. Love is a wonderful feeling about which books are written, music is made, and films are created. However, if it is a perverted love from a sick person, then it can be so destructive that it breaks many lives. It is wonderful when dreams come true, and everything goes perfectly as planned. The last thing you want to do is encounter something unexpected on a day like a wedding, especially if we are talking about an armed criminal ready to kill. In 1979, in Timbal, Dominican Republic, Gladys Rickard was raising her little son during this period. The heroine of the story was 20 years old. She became a single mother after an unsuccessful relationship in high school. Her sister, Norma, lived in the USA, and the girl dreamed of joining her. To make her dream come true, Gladys worked hard to save money and limited herself in various ways. Eventually, this hard work allowed her to migrate to the USA, where she was able to settle with her sister's family in Manhattan, New York. Unfortunately, at the initial stages of the move, she did not have enough money to take her son with her. Therefore, her son, Davis, stayed with his family in their homeland. Immediately after the move, Gladys began to learn English and got a job. She worked hard to save up the necessary amount to transfer her child to the States. By 1983, she finally managed to do it, and the young mother was reunited with her 4-year-old son, Davis. After that, the heroine of the story entered college, realizing that without an education, she had few prospects. She wanted to increase her chances of getting a good job and start building a career. Gladys managed to graduate from the economics department. She applied her knowledge to work in the field of accounting and quickly became a first-class specialist, one of the most valuable employees of the company. The woman gradually rose from the very bottom and managed to ascend to the position of chief accountant. She worked in a large travel agency located in the very center of Manhattan. Gladys did not look like a classic immigrant. She improved her English to a good level, received an education, achieved success in a good job, and saved money for an apartment. In reality, she was able to fulfill her American dream. However, she still wanted to acquire a full-fledged family and find love. In this direction, Gladys was very careful. It seemed she preferred career success over relationships and marriage. However, all this was only the first deceptive impression. In fact, she dreamed of meeting her soulmate. In 1992, having lived in the States for 10 years, she walked the same path every day, going to the office by subway in the morning and returning home in the evening, where her sister lived. It was on the subway that she met a man named Austin Garcia. He was one of the leaders of the Dominican community in the state, a prominent figure who, by the age of 40, had managed to build a successful career, just like Gladys. At the time, he had moved to the United States from the Dominican Republic at a young age. Like Gladys, he had made a long career path, rising from poverty to successful entrepreneurship. By the time he met Gladys, he owned several small firms and was the father of 2 children from a previous marriage, both of whom lived with him in a large house. However, this did not make Austin sleep glory in the local Dominican community. He occupied the most prominent place as a reliable person ready to help his neighbors. He knew how to emigrate and start life from scratch, so he sincerely wanted to help everyone who wanted to try their hand at this difficult path. He also became the director of the Dominican Chamber of Commerce in New York and several other organizations associated with his native country. Austin was not just a member of all these companies, he also carried out extensive social activities. Thanks to his efforts, several kindergartens and schools were opened, and he became a respected and influential member of the community. The man seemed the perfect match for Gladys, who was also a purposeful and responsive young woman. One of the most attractive features of Austin, in Gladys's opinion, was his docile nature. He behaved like a gentleman, was polite and sociable, which immediately attracted the attention of the heroine of the story. In fact, their meeting was pure chance since Austin practically did not use the subway. He ended up there by coincidence when his wealthy car broke down. The businessman was immediately charmed by Gladys's beauty and decided to get to know her. The rest of the trip was filled with conversation, and they exchanged phone numbers, promising to meet again soon. Immediately after that, their romance began. Austin constantly took Gladys to restaurants, treated her to exquisite dishes, and gave her expensive gifts. Gladys's family was happy for her when they found out about her new boyfriend. He was a worthy candidate for the role of husband and father to her son. The couple met often, and at one point, Austin decided that he was ready to take the relationship to a new level. He offered Gladys to move in with him. The young mother willingly accepted this long-awaited offer. By her confession to her family and friends, at that time, her most cherished dream was an offer from Austin so they could raise children together. At that moment, Gladys was not yet 33 years old. She finally moved in with her lover, but from the very beginning, things began to change for the worse. Her son, Davis, had great difficulties getting along with Austin's children. Davis tried very hard, particularly at the request of his mother, who literally begged him in every possible way to find a common language with everyone. However, the man's children were too arrogant, and unfortunately, the relationship never improved. The situation only got more complicated, while Austin was always on his children's side, even if they were obviously wrong. This caused a lot of tension in the couple's relationship. After 2 years of such a life and endless arguments, Gladys realized that she did not want to torment her son anymore and told Austin that living together wouldn't work. Austin agreed with her but didn't break off the relationship. He helped the woman find a new house, which was located a few minutes' drive from his home. It was a spacious 2-story house, and he didn't spare money for his beloved woman. It seemed that in this way, it was possible to smooth out the corners in their relationship. The couple continued to meet when Austin visited Gladys. By this time, her friends had become so accustomed to Austin that they considered him practically a member of the family. The wealthy businessman introduced his companion as his wife. Despite the fact that their relationship was not secured by marriage, Gladys continued to try to persuade Austin to marry her, but he persistently refused, arguing that this was due to his previous unsuccessful marriage. He insisted that he no longer wanted to officially marry or have children together, as he saw no point in unnecessary bureaucratic problems. According to Gladys's relatives, over time, all of this reached an extreme point when her happiness in this relationship began to fade and the unpleasant sides of Austin surfaced. As it turned out, he periodically had affairs on the side, and he began to demonstrate increasingly controlling behavior. Gladys knew about all this and kept silent for a long time because she did not want problems. Unfortunately, her inaction only aggravated Austin's behavior. During another argument, he pulled out his gun and chased after Gladys. She managed to hide in and lock the door, but from that moment, the woman realized that it was time to break off the relationship with him. However, the fear of the manipulator lingered for some time, preventing her from ending things. She wanted a convincing reason to ensure that Austin would have no arguments left, and the easiest way to do this was to catch him in an affair. The situation worsened until the fall of 1998 when Gladys finally came to Austin's office and found him with another woman. It became an excellent opportunity to sever the connection. She immediately informed Austin that it was all over, moved out of his house, and notified all her loved ones so everyone would know that the wealthy businessman was no longer a welcome guest in Gladys's life. Despite the breakup, Austin was not ready for such changes. He perceived Gladys as his property, which he had owned for 7 years. Following this spat, he constantly called her, left gifts on her doorstep, bouquets of flowers, and even a Bible. Gladys considered these pathetic attempts to win her back, but her family saw something more significant in these efforts. It seemed that he was giving symbolic gifts with hidden meanings. In any case, Gladys was not going to renew the relationship with him under any circumstances. Several months passed when Gladys met a man named James Preston Jr. in a restaurant during their lunch break. The new acquaintance also worked in accounting and part-time as a musician. A connection formed between them at first sight, and after just a few dates, the couple decided to formalize their relationship within 2 months. James and Gladys spent all their free time together, and finally, a wedding date was set for September 26, 1999. Gladys and her family were happy because the woman's long-standing dream of a wedding and a white dress was about to be fulfilled. She was busy with pleasant tasks related to the wedding preparations, so much so that she did not realize how Austin came to her house almost every night and watched her for hours. He clearly could not overcome his possessiveness. On August 12, a month and a half before the wedding, Gladys and her fiancé were enjoying a quiet romantic evening when Austin appeared at the door. At first, he calmly asked to talk to her, but she refused. His calm demeanor quickly changed. He lost his temper, started shouting, and then threw stones at the windows. Fearing further aggression, Gladys called the police. Austin was detained, but she decided not to press charges to avoid creating problems for him. Additionally, she did not want to be distracted from preparing for the celebration, which turned out to be a big mistake. September 26th arrived, just 2 days before the wedding. Gladys went to the store to buy necessary items for the bridesmaids. As it turned out, her ex was following her. He caught her in one of the aisles of the supermarket and hugged her as if they were getting along well and were even a couple. Gladys did not resist, as she did not want to provoke the anger of the stalker. They talked briefly and then said goodbye. That same evening, she discussed Austin's behavior with her fiancé and relatives, expressing her unease about his increasingly intrusive actions. Unfortunately, she did not fully grasp how dangerous he had become. The long-awaited day of September 26, 1999, arrived. 39-year-old Gladys was at home with her family and friends, getting ready for the ceremony. She was dressed up, her hair and makeup were done, and the bride was glowing with happiness. Little did she know that these captured moments would turn out to be the last of her life. Meanwhile, the groom was already waiting for her in the church. However, circumstances would overshadow this happy moment. Gladys's ex-boyfriend, Austin, entered the scene. He abruptly pulled out a .45 caliber pistol from his bag and shot the bride 3 times. The first bullet struck her chest, the second hit her spine, and the third went into her head. After the third shot, Gladys died instantly. The paramedics who arrived later were powerless to save her life, leaving her dream of a wedding unfulfilled. Austin was immediately detained and taken to the police station. He did not try to escape or resist arrest. Here, he spoke with one of the investigators and admitted that he was heading to his house in Manhattan and decided to drive his car past Gladys's house. He claimed to have done this all the time, which made it seem like he was keeping watch over her. When asked about his actions, he explained them away with his sentimentality. That morning, he was shocked by the large number of people in dresses and tuxedos, as well as several limousines in front of Gladys's house. He had no idea that she was going to get married, and the man was so surprised that he drove back and forth several times before stopping in front of the house. Austin still did not understand whose wedding it was and decided to go inside to find out what exactly was happening. As soon as he got out of his car on the opposite side of the street, the victim's brother, a young man named Juan, approached him. He was careful because he knew the bad character of his sister's ex. The relative tried to convince him to leave, so as not to ruin Gladys's wedding. At that moment, Austin realized that his ex was getting married to a man but did not show it. Austin got out of the car, and according to him, he was invited to the celebration, so the brother did not interfere and he calmly entered the house. No one argued with him. When the criminal was first asked to describe the shooting in the house, he claimed that he did not remember anything. However, after some time, the gunman confessed to detectives that he always had a gun with him and he brought it into the house. When asked why he had killed an innocent woman, he did not provide a satisfactory explanation. The next day, the detainee was taken to the courthouse for a preliminary hearing. It was supposed to read him a list of charges, and here he had a chance to plead guilty to avoid a grueling trial with bail set at $5 million. This high bail spoke volumes about the significant threat that the criminal presented. However, the image of Austin as a kind and influential person quickly transformed, and the attack that had taken place became a high-profile crime. As a result of the active work of the media, the story received wide publicity. Journalists vied with each other to publish loud statements, rumors, and the most ridiculous assumptions. The killer's photo began to appear regularly on national news, and the scale of this case attracted lawyers, including top-notch specialists who simply wanted to make a name for themselves in connection with a high-profile murder. The trial of the businessman was scheduled for October 2, 2001. Thus, the defense had almost 2 years to thoroughly prepare for the case and to form a positive image of the criminal. The hired lawyers immediately began to work with the media, holding press conferences and speaking to the public. All this was required to form a certain opinion among people regarding the crime that had occurred. The lawyers tried to portray Austin as a victim. The first attempt they made was to accuse Gladys's brother Juan and the victim's son of assaulting Austin. They contended that he did not intend to kill his ex. It was an accident when he began to defend his life from the aggressive Juan Davis, who attacked him together. Simultaneously, the defense began to denigrate Gladys and Austin through numerous betrayals, claiming that the two were going to renew their relationship but, unbeknownst to him, the woman was preparing to marry another man. For this reason, they suggested, the killer pulled the trigger due to an emotional breakdown. Austin was reportedly shocked to see how his beloved woman was going to marry someone else. They had even been holding hands in the supermarket just the day before. It was at that very moment that one had attacked him, provoking the shots. According to the defense, this was a crime of passion, which under state law could be classified as manslaughter. In this case, the defendant faced a much more lenient sentence, 5 to 10 years in prison instead of life imprisonment. The bright image of the man who was actually accused played a major role in the public's perception of the case. Known as a caring and compassionate person who poured his heart and soul into the Latino community of New York, the narrative shifted when false rumors spread that Gladys was cheating on Austin. The attitude toward her immediately worsened, and there were even people who believed that the victim got what she deserved. This outrage came as a real shock to the Rickard family. Once Gladys' relatives realized the colossal harm that the killer's lawyers were causing, they began to attend every press conference to defend the good name of the murdered bride. The brothers and sisters of the victim, along with her parents, insisted that the rumors of infidelity were a dirty lie. They claimed that the relationship between the killer and his victim had long since been severed and could not be renewed. It was Augustine who continued his obsessive pursuit of the woman, behaving inappropriately. However, it was only because of Gladys's compassion that he did not have problems with the law before the murder. Unfortunately, he himself was incapable of compassion. The information about the murder reached the judge. Attending press conferences and interviews with journalists were officially banned. Nevertheless, they had already managed to cause colossal damage to the victim's image. This became a problem for the prosecution. Even during the trial in court, the lawyers continued to portray the criminal as a victim while denigrating the victim. They even had one important trump card. It turned out that the process of the attack, as well as the death of the bride, was captured on film. The beginning of the celebration and preparations were filmed on camera. Austin did not notice when the first phase of the hearing was scheduled. Only the judge himself had the right to view this video. The defenders continued to insist that these materials should not be shown to the jury, claiming that it represented an unfair advantage for the prosecution. The lawyers, as best they could, attempted to prevent this most important argument of the prosecutor's office from being introduced. After lengthy discussions, the court decided that the evidence could be used, but only the moment when the shooting of the bride was directly captured. It was a 15-second fragment. The prosecution doubted that it would be enough to convince the jury, given that this moment could be taken out of context. This gave the lawyers room to maneuver. The defense continued to build their tactics, claiming that the sudden attack of the victim's brother and son forced Austin to take up arms and that the 3 bullets that hit Gladys were fired accidentally. Despite the protests of the victim's family, the killer's lawyers insisted that all of this was caused by her dissolute lifestyle. They provided several witnesses, including a family who lived next door to Austin. The father and his daughter testified at the trial, claiming that they had seen Gladys in the house just a few days before the incident. They even believed that the lovers were still a couple and living together, although in fact, the woman had come to him to pick up her remaining things. Thanks to these manipulations, the lawyer managed to gain the jury's sympathy for the criminal. Fortunately, the prosecutor's office had ways to counter this. The tactics were primarily based on a video recording, which contained grim shots of the criminal taking the life of his ex in front of her family members, including her son. It was obvious that he was not defending himself. All the bullets fired hit the victim. After this demonstration of what transpired, the prosecution began to point out other flaws in the lawyer's version. In particular, the 15th recording contained no evidence that the killer was attacked after he entered Gladys's house. No one even approached him. Despite this, Austin took out a weapon and opened fire. He did not try to defend himself, as the barrel of the loaded pistol was aimed at the bride from the start until the last second. The attack was clearly a premeditated act, motivated by jealousy, as the criminal had come into the house armed and ready to kill. Not only was the gun full of bullets, but he had brought spare ammunition with him, likely in case the full magazine was not enough for the execution. However, the lawyers had their own answers to all this. They argued that Austin was a well-known businessman, a wealthy man who could potentially have enemies, so he always carried a loaded weapon with him for his own protection. The prosecutor's office also sought to refute the defense's characterization of the victim as dissolute. There was ample evidence that after the breakup, the ex-boyfriend had stalked Gladys for a long time. All her relatives affirmed this. Even her own son was afraid of Austin, knowing how cruel he could be. The kindness and selflessness he displayed were merely a mask for the true face of the criminal. Surveillance and unpredictable visits from Austin continued for at least the last few months. In the criminal's car, a list of license plates of vehicles parked near Gladys's house was found. He did not merely spy on his future victim. He kept a comprehensive record of every person who was constantly in her vicinity, likely to identify the neighbors' cars and pinpoint the vehicle belonging to Gladys's future husband. While debates continued, the killer made a controversial decision. He chose to speak on his own behalf before the jury. This choice would ultimately influence the subsequent sentence. It is worth noting that, in the practice of law, such a move can be seen as both normal and potentially salvaging for the accused. The prosecution asked him to recount the incident in the house, expecting him to echo the version given by his lawyers, namely, that he had entered an emotional state and lost control. Instead, the criminal claimed that he felt calm when he saw Gladys in a wedding dress. According to Austin, Juan and Davis had attacked him, yet this argument had already been thoroughly refuted after reviewing the video evidence. During his testimony, the defendant stated that he fell out of reality at that moment and did not remember how he shot with the pistol. Fortunately for the prosecution, nothing he said aligned with the state of emotional distress he claimed to be in. Throughout his testimony, the criminal attempted to display remorse and even cried, but after the interview, it all appeared unconvincing. On February 1, 2002, the victim's family awaited the final decision after a lengthy hearing. The jury went to deliberate, and Austin was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a possibility of parole after 30 years behind bars. Gladys was buried in her hometown of Tambar in the Dominican Republic, with her body sent home a week after her death. The woman was laid to rest in her wedding dress. A year later, in memory of Gladys, a Florida resident donned a wedding dress and participated in a marathon. After giving an interview, she explained that it was done in memory of Gladys's death. In the name of combating domestic violence, several communities continue to hold annual marches, with brides across the states joining. Unfortunately, these efforts have not led to a significant reduction in the severity of the problem. After the trials, Austin refused to speak publicly and did not provide any comments. Reports indicated that since the beginning of his imprisonment, he turned to the gospel and began preaching among fellow inmates. Meanwhile, his lawyers fought for a lighter sentence, but several appeals were rejected. Austin remains in prison and is eligible for parole in 2029. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed our work. See you in the next videos on the channel, Friday Trina True Crime.